Okay, good morning, everyone. Hopefully, there's a few of you good people out there listening to me. This is the first in a series of classes on the book of Daniel. This is part of the ongoing Beit Midrash program of Kihilat Shir Chadash. And I'm just going to check on how we're appearing to be. Okay, looks like it's working and we're live and there is somebody out there. So welcome. Today is of course Yom HaZikaron, and we are remembering all the Chayalim, Chayalot, all the people who died al Kiddush Hashem, defending our land and in acts of terrorism. And our learning today is dedicated Le'ili Nishmotehem, for the elevation and raising of their souls. So, why is the book of Daniel important? Why are we doing this now? Why have we started with this particular class and this set of information, this type of subject? The reason is really very, very simple. There's an enormous amount of interest in what is going on in the world today, the coronavirus, the isolation that we're all in. And there are a lot of people out there on the internet giving classes and teaching about the end of days. When is the end of days coming? How is it going to play out? What is the role of this particular set of circumstances in bringing us closer to the end of days? Does it in fact have a role at all? You'll hear a lot said from the Zohar. You'll hear a lot of quotations from the Chafetz Chaim. You'll hear quotations from Rambam and Rosadia Gaon, who actually spelled out and gave a particular day, a particular year rather, for when the Messiah should arrive. What I think everybody is, of course, ignoring is the book of Daniel. I'm particularly interested in the book of Daniel. A couple of years ago, a number of people asked me to sit and learn this with them. And this is where we started, and this is where I want to start today. I want to start with an introduction that will show to you the absolute fundamental importance of the book of Daniel, its pictures and its visions, for how we look at the entire trajectory of human history. It's not going to be a very scientific reading or a scholarly study, and we're going to look at almost 100% Jewish sources. Today we're certainly all in the classic commentaries and the Midrashim. We're going to take a look at Mefarshim that you all know, Midrashim that back up and are the sources for all of these. But the number one point that I really want to keep emphasizing, and I'm going to say this over and over again, and I'm going to have a number of other Mefarshim and Midrashim telling you the same thing, that the beginning and the end are tied together. When we look at the book of Daniel, we're looking at a book that is indeed talking about, number one, how history progresses from beginning to end, and number two, who's going to be doing what, and the precise time of the end of history. Okay? There are a lot of things that we're going to be ignoring, and I'm intentionally not putting our focus today on Daniel chapter 1, verse 1, because there's an enormous amount of things there that we could spend a lot of time with, but we really, I'm going to... Some of you are saying you can't hear the sound. I am certainly working. My microphone is working. If any others of you cannot hear the sound, please do indicate that. It looks like it's working for me. And hopefully, I am not the great technical whiz, but we have video, we have audio, and everything is working nicely as far as as far as I can see, absolutely everything is working. Linda, I'm sorry, don't have any more settings to tweak here. I'm using my camera, I'm streaming, I'm checking all the various issues here. Stream setup, stream health, my stream metrics are good. Okay, so I have absolutely no ability to fix anything other than this. Is anybody else hearing me? Is anyone else even actually listening? Yeah, I'm getting video, I'm getting everything is looking pretty nice here. All right, I'm going to go and continue because obviously I hear myself talking, and I guess that's not a particularly wonderful thing, but hopefully somebody is hearing and listening. Okay, about 7 people listening to me. Yeah, good. So Sharon is saying she can hear me. Fine. Okay. Linda, I think the problem is on your end. I'm sorry, but that's I can do with all of this. Started because I need to get started in doing the text. And I've produced and put together quite a few pieces on the source sheet. You should be able to find that on the Shir Chadash website, not the website, rather the Facebook page. Okay. We're going to take a look at what I consider to be an absolutely foundational statement. And there's a two-faceted issue here. And that is, I need to get clear in everyone's mind the fact that the beginning and the end are intimately connected. The beginning includes the end only exists because of the beginning. I mean, that's relatively obvious. But once we start looking at these commentaries, which are on Sefer Bereshit, and these are things that I'm sure you're all very familiar with, if you have a Chumash in front of you, Genesis, Bereshit, chapter 1, verse number 1. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. Verse number 2 is what we're going to be looking at here. Va'aretz hayta tohu vavohu. The world, the cosmos, was full of void and chaos. V'choshech al panei tehom, and there was darkness on the surface of the deep. V'ruach Elohim, and the Spirit of God merachefet, was hovering above the surface of the waters. Text number 1 on the sheet is from the Rabbeinu Bachya ben Asher, Spain, died in 1310. So we're going to take a look here because this is really, really important. The translations, it turns out, are not so perfect with regard to the Hebrew text. They're not mine, so I just take responsibility for putting them there. Here is what Rabbeinu Bachya says on God distinguishing between the light and the darkness. Right, very top of the page, source number 1. Kivo Yavdil HaKadosh Baruch Hu, God separated. This is an allusion to the separation between the Jews and the nations of the earth. The Jewish people, of course, are... Linda's back with us in terms of sound. Thank you. Miracles do happen. Right, second line there. The Jewish people, we are kavu lishua. We are hoping and focusing our minds towards salvation, towards the awaited end, the redemption. And the rest of the nations of the world are, of course, lying there in darkness. Our rabbis have pulled this source into a very different direction. Not just the creation of the earth, but min hakatuv hazeh arba malchuyot. that the four kingdoms, and when we get to Daniel chapter 2, in Nebuchadnezzar's dream, chapter 3, the king making the statue, and further on, the visions that Daniel has, they're talking about Arba Malchuyot, four nations that are going to dominate the world and, of course, dominate Israel. And here we go. This is Rabbeinu Bachya, right at the very, very beginning of Bereshit, at the time of creation, that Tohu and Bohu refer to Bavel and Madai. The word Tohu is Babylon, chaos, and Bohu, meaning a void, is Media, the Persian nation. Choshech, the darkness spoken about there in Genesis 1:2, is the nation of Greece. Tehom, the deep, is the kingdom of Rome. And Ruach Elohim is the fifth kingdom, the spirit of Messiah, Mashiach, who is there from the very beginning. So literally at the moment of creation. The end that we get spelled out a good deal more clearly is in the book of Daniel. And here we go, here with the third, fourth line in Rabbeinu Bachya. What this is meaning, what this is telling us, is that in this parasha, the creation of the world, Magid Mereshit Acharit, that God is telling us from the very beginning how it's all going to end. And telling us that in the very beginning is the end. Tachlit kavanat habriya hi limot hamashiach. That the ultimate perfect world, the time of the Messiah, the Messianic era, is what God had in mind when he put all of creation into play. This is an absolutely fundamental statement. And over again, we're going to come back to this in so many different sources, that the end is indeed predicted and prepared in the very, very beginning. Okay, let's zip on to source number 2. The Balaturim. Rabbi Yaakov ben Asher died in 1343 in the city of Toledo. Tohu and Vohu. We can look in the English here because it's relatively correct and straightforward. Tohu and Bohu refer to, take us to a verse in Jeremiah. Jeremiah is, of course, the prophet of the end of the first Jewish Commonwealth, the destruction of the temple, and the exile into Babylon. Melamed, says the Balaturim, Shetzafa HaKadosh Baruch Hu b'vriyat ha'olam b'churban habayit. That here encoded in the creation story, first verse of the second verse of the creation story, is the Churban Habayit, the end of the Jewish Commonwealth, of the kingdom, the destruction of the temple. And the Tohu and Bohu, this is Rabbeinu, the Baal HaTurim, doing exactly what he always does, and bring out the numbers for us, the gematrias. Here we're dealing with the numbers as literally numbers. Tohu, and you see that clearly in the English here, are equivalent to the number 411. The first temple stood for 410 years, destroyed in the 411th year. The second temple stood the numerical equivalent of the word Hayata, V'ha'aretz Hayata, 420. Right? That the second temple and the first temple, their periods of existence were encoded and told to us and revealed to us in the very beginning. This is the most important overall point that I want to make today. That there is a beginning, it is in Bereshit, Genesis, creation, there is an end point, it is spelled out as well as it can be, as well as God has allowed it to be revealed in the book of Daniel. Okay? And they're deeply, deeply connected. Source number 3 is the Midrash that connects the two sources that we just looked at. Rabbeinu Bachya and Balaturim. And this is Bereshit Rabbah. Our Midrash texts are going to be almost exclusively from Bereshit Rabbah. That is definitely available in English somewhere, and if you're interested, I can look this up for you. There is a translation. Source number 3, Breshit Rabbah, chapter 2. Right, Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish Patar Karaya Begaluyot. The methodology of the Midrash in Breshit Rabbah is to take a verse and then interpret it in a number of different ways. And this is one of the interpretations for this particular verse. V'ayetz hayata tohu ze galut Bavel. The tohu refers to the exile in Babylon. And there is a verse in Jeremiah which gives us a linguistic connection. I'm not going to get into the technical stuff there. We're here to get the bigger picture. Bohu is Galut Madai, Media, the Persians, story of Mordechai and Esther. Choshech ze Galut Yavan, Greece. Again, there is a linguistic connection from some of the verses here. Al Pnei Tehom, Ze Galut Mamlechet Harisha'ah. We're going to come up within many of the discussions of what the fourth exile is, what it's called, how it's referred to in different sources, and also why it's gone on for so long. The fourth exile is usually referred to as the Galut of Edom or Rome, and it is characterized here as the Tehom, the deep, deep ocean. Why, says the Midrash, She'ein lahem cheker kemo hatehom. Cheker means figuring out, scientific discussion, counting. What I feel that the Midrash is saying here is this particular exile that we are living in now is long and deep, like the depths of the ocean. You can't measure how deep the ocean is. Af harishaim, so the evil ones are. And here the Midrash is saying Mamlechet Harisha'ah. We're dealing with a couple of different issues. Again, what the name is called, the evil kingdom. Here it is. There have been numerous attempts over the course of history to edit various books of Jewish learning, Talmud, Midrash, etc. And sometimes the names are interchanged. This is the evil kingdom. This is the kingdom of Rome. This is the exile that is just going on and on and on, and does not seem to have any end, nor do we have an ability to see the end of it. We don't see the depths of the deepest ocean. Okay, so here we have in Genesis chapter 1, right at the very, very beginning of creation, the deep connection of the text to the book of Daniel. If we had not read or ever seen the book of Daniel, none of this would be possible. This type of connection and this type of linking would not happen. Zip ahead in your Chumash to Genesis Sefer Bereshit chapter 2. Chapter 2, verse number 10. Yeah, we're still in creation. We're still in the creation story. God makes the Garden of Eden and puts the first man in there. And verse number 10 says, V'nahar yotzei me'en, a river goes forth from Eden to water the garden. And from there ye parade, it separates. V'haya la'arba'a roshim. And the translation that I'm looking at said, becomes 4 head waters. The river is one, and then it separates into 4 roshim, heads, not other rivers. Obviously, this is going to connect with our sets of 4 as well. The text number 4 is Torah Moshe of the Alshich. The commentary of Rabbi Moshe Alshich died in 1593. Lived a good portion of his life in the holy city of Tzfat. First line in text number 4. V'nei amruzal. Our rabbis have said, and this is a quote from Bereshit Rabbah, we're going to take a look at that text as well. Arba'a roshim elu arba'a galuyot. The 4 rivers coming out of the Garden of Eden refer to the 4 exiles. And he's bringing different verses, and he's quoting the Midrash directly. Why each is called each one, and we're not terribly interested in that. It's not going to be on the final exam. Shema Achad Pishon. The first river is called Pishon. This refers to the king of Babylon. Chidekel is Yavan, Greece. The fourth one is Parat, meaning Edom. What he then says is, of course, V'hinei ein nira po yechel hamalchiyot. I really don't think there is a connection here to the four kingdoms and their kings, but perhaps there is an allusion here in the verse, and that is the opinion of Rav Moshe Alshich. He's quoting Chazal, and he's quoting this particular midrash from Bereshit Rabbah, and there's a bit more to it. So I printed the midrash text. Amar Rabbi Tanchum Yeshua ben Levi, source number 5. In the future, God will hashkot kos tarela, will make the nations of the world drink a cup of poison. From the place where din goes out, from the place where justice comes from. So Gan Eden, getting back to the garden, is the picture of how things are going to be. And the river that goes out is going to be a poisonous one that will destroy the four nations that are also alluded to by those same rivers. Right? The four nations are according to the four rivers, and they are the four ones that we're familiar with. Right? Pishon refers to Babylon. The second one is Gihon. This refers to Madai, the Persians. And the third is Greece, Chideka. And the fourth is Parat, Edom. Okay? If you want to read all of these midrashim in greater detail, I'm very happy to sit and do this with you all. But my focus here has got to be the much, much bigger picture. We need to get very, very clearly in our minds the visions that Daniel has, the vision that the king has and that he interprets for him, and then the pictures of the four beasts and the statues and how this all plays out. Okay, we're going to zip ahead. Abraham, right? Creation is leading to the end of days. Abraham, first Jew. If you're familiar with the Brit Bein Habitarim, we're going there next. And before that, we're going to go with the war of the four kings and the five kings. This is the one where Lot is captured and Abraham comes and saves him. Chapter 14 in Sefer Bereshit. I've just put in the text from Ramban. Vayehi bimei Amraphel. Chapter 14, verse number 1. It happened in the days of Amraphel, the king of Shinar, Arioch, the king of Elasar, Kedar Omer, the king of Elam, and Tidal Melech Goyim, the king of the Goyim. Again, four nations, very, very obviously connecting, and Ramban brings it down for us here. These four kings foreshadowed the four kingdoms have dominion over Israel, Babylon, Persia, Greece, and Rome, but in the end, Israel will be victorious over them. Right, so here we have in the life of Abraham and the significant events of the life of Abraham, again, the four kingdoms, the end of days, and how it's all going to play out. Look at note number 7. This is, of course, one that you all know very well. It is chapter 15 of Bereshit, of the book of Genesis, chapter 15, verse number 14, the Brit Bein Habitarim, where Abraham is told by God to, I'm going to go back a couple of lines here. God says to Abraham, take 3 heifers, 3 goats, 3 rams, a dove, and a fledgling. Different animals. Why 3? Or why of 3 years old? Right? You're going to see this is very, 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 very interesting. Abraham took all of these, cut them in the center, placed them opposite each piece, with the exception of the birds. The birds of prey descended on the carcass. Abraham drove them away. And Abraham goes into a very, very deep sleep. Right? Sleep is going to obviously be significant because we are getting dream scenes in the book of Daniel almost from beginning to end. So verse number 14 here follows from verse number 13. God says to Abraham, know that you will be a stranger, your children, your descendants will be a stranger in a land that is not theirs. They will serve them for 400 years. V'gam et hagoy hasher ya'avodu dan anochi. The nation that they serve, right? Egypt in that particular case, I will judge, says God. And Rashi has this there. V'gam l'rabot arba malchuyot. Specifically referring to the four monarchies of the book of Daniel, because they will perish, they will end because they have enslaved the Jewish people. Text number 8 is the Midrash, and this is an important Midrash. When the Midrash is writing, it's very difficult to know, but the earlier editions of the Midrash Bereshit Rabbah are certainly 7th, 8th century CE. And what I have here in this particular text is the Midrash reading the Daniel prophecy number 1 into the Abraham Brit Bein HaBetarim piece. But perhaps more important for our purposes is adapting the prophecies, the predictions from the book of Daniel to the time of the writers of the Midrash. Most of the people that we see writing and quoted in the Midrash Bereshit Rabbah are Tanaim, Amoraim, Talmud era people, and they're looking out at the world around them, and they're saying, hey, I see the book of Daniel being fulfilled. I see the four kingdoms playing out in the way that it is described for us towards the end of the book of Daniel, with a fourth kingdom and with difficulties and divisions in that fourth kingdom. So this is setting the stage for how the Mefarshim, how the classic commentaries from Rashi, Ibn Ezra, all of the others, Rav Sadia Gaon, all look at the book of Daniel and its predictions from their particular point of view in time. And the exercise for us, of course, is to look around the world today and say, where do we fit in? How do the events swirling around us fit in with the predictions of the fourth kingdom? So note number 8, text number 8, Davar Acher. Gechali egel mishuleshet. God said, take to me either a 3-year-old or 3. The Art Scroll translation that I have here in front of me says three calves. I'm not entirely sure how that happens in terms of translation, but the 3 refers to Babylon, which had 3 kings. There are 3 kings of Babylon that are mentioned in Tanakh: Nebuchadnezzar, Evel Merodach, and Belshazzar. Belshazzar is the one that Daniel deals with. Eiz Mishuleshet, the goat. This is Madai, which also had 3 kings. V'ayil Mishulash, and the ayil, the ram, refers to Yavan, to Greece. The interesting bit that I want to bring to the forefront here is the middle piece. Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Yochanan, it's Rabbi Elazar rather. Rabbi Elazar says, Kol haruchot kavshu b'nei Yavan, that the Greeks, the empire that Rabbi Elazar and his people and his time were living under, they conquered Ruach Michit Lo Kavshu. They conquered in 3 directions of the compass, but not the 4th. And this refers to something we will be seeing in Daniel chapter 8, that the Ayil, right, which the Midrash here has said refers to Greece. Ra'iti et ha'ayil min nageach, goring. There's more than one picture, and there's more than one set of images. And there are wild beasts, and then there are specific animals. If you get into the prophet Zechariah, which we can get to after all of this, then we will be looking at horses as the particular imagery, but always 4. So in Daniel chapter 8, verse 2, Daniel sees the ayil, the ram, goring all the compasses of all the directions of the compass, with the exception of east. And that is exactly what we see predicted here, or spelled out here. Let's move on to source number 9. Okay. Source number 9. The deep dream falls upon Avraham. Ema, fear, chashecha, great darkness. Again, we are taking the verses in Daniel chapter 3, then Jeremiah and Isaiah, and we're putting together words in this midrash that have the 4 kingdoms alluded to in different kinds of expressions and descriptions rather than animals. Ema, fear, is Babylon. In Daniel chapter 3, verse 19, it's quoted there. It's obviously Aramaic. And you can see the same word, Ema, Chema, that Nebuchadnezzar, the king, was terrified because of his dream. No, he was actually became very angry. Itmalei Chema rather than Ema. Chashecha, darkness, refers to a Media. Great refers to Yavan. Falling, Nofelet Alav, this is Edom. V'yesh machlifin. Here's where it starts to get interesting. And we have the very earliest stages of reading and trying to understand the book of Daniel, that we can't always be certain which thing in the book refers to which nation. Nofelet Alav perhaps refers to Babylon. And Chashecha, darkness, refers to Greece. Ema is then Edom. There's room for discussion, there's room for interpretation, and from the very, very beginning of reading the book of Daniel, there is a variety of opinions of how this plays out. Which nation is which nation is going to be divided into which particular parts. Okay? We're still in Bereshit, and this is the last one we're going to take a look at in Bereshit. Bereshit chapter 28, which is Jacob's dream, Parshat Vayetze. And the text is, again, very, very well known to you, I'm sure. Jacob is fleeing from his brother Esau. He goes to sleep. We're told it's the place of Har Habayit. He has a dream there. Vayachalom, he dreamed. Verse number 12, chapter 28. V'nei sulam mutzav arza. And behold, a ladder was set earthward. Its feet were on the ground. V'rosho magia hashamayma. And its head was going up into heaven. The ladder reached from earth to heaven. V'nei malachei Elohim, and behold, angels of God, olim, were going up, v'yordim, and going down on it. Right? Absolutely beautiful picture. Everyone knows it. And we all know the standard interpretations that are drawn out of it. But here is a Barbanel. Don Yitzchak Abarbanel died in 1508 in the city of Venice. Of course, was born in Portugal, lived in Spain. Hine Sulam, going up to Vayikat Yaakov Mishnato. The difficulty with Abarbanel is he says a lot, and his commentary is very, very long. There's about 4 or 5 pages of text just on this one particular point. But this vision that came to Jacob, we have to know what it is. We have to understand what it's all about and what it's trying to teach us. And over time, up to and including his time, there are many, many different opinions. This is opinion number 2, which is from Rabbi Eliezer Hagadol, Sheharei HaKadosh Baruch Hu Bazeh Memshelet Arba Malchuyot. The vision of the ladder, the angels going up and down, is a representation of the 4 nations, the 4 kingdoms. Their rise and then their ultimate descent. Their rise to power and then their going down from being in power and crumbling to dust. And it is for this reason that God showed Jacob a sulam, a ladder, mutzav arza, firmly planted in the ground, and its head reaching up to the heavens. Lehodia, this is the key line here. Shemina shamayim yushpu'u memshalotehem, that their power, their rulership, their dominion is given from heaven. Shefa is, of course, divine energy. The flow of divine energy for these nations to dominate the Jewish people, the land of Israel, and the entire known world comes from heaven. And the angels that he saw going up and going down, Heim Sarehem, Kemoshe Ne'emar b'Daniel. This we'll get to towards the end of Daniel, in the second half of the book, that each of the nations has a representative angel. There are forces up there in heaven. They represent, one representing each of the four nations and one representing us, the Jewish nation. And just as we battle it out here on earth, so that same battle takes place in the spiritual realms up in heaven. And this is Daniel chapter 8, chapter 9, where you've got this very clear picture of the angel of the nation of Israel fighting the angel of the other nations. Okay? And of course, the promise that God gives to Abraham is everything's going to be, or rather Jacob in this case, it's all going to work out well in the end. Right? The Midrash in number 11 here, source number 11, is similar but not the same. The angels going up and down, and we've decided, following a Barbanel, refer to the four nations. Here we're going to look at the Midrash Breshit Rabbah Samachet. It's 68, and right under the red number 11. Hine Sulam Zechalomo Shel Nebuchadnezzar. That this is the vision, the dream that King Nebuchadnezzar had in Daniel chapter 2. He sees this enormous statue, and there is a direct parallel. It is stuck into the ground, Musav Arza, we read in Bereshit. In Daniel, it is standing firmly on the ground and everyone can see it. Its head reached up to the heavens, the head of the ladder in Jacob's dream. The vision of the statue that the king made was very great, and it reaches up into the heavens. V'nei malachim. Now the Midrash is going to be medayek. It's going to go very specifically into the words of Jacob's dream. Olim, going up, means two angels. The minimum number for a plural is two. V'yordim, shnayim, going down, two. Elu sarei arba malchuyot. This refers to the guardian angels, the heavenly representatives of the four kingdoms, sheshal tanutam gomeret bahem, whose rulership, whose power finishes with them. Olim v'yordim is what the text says. They go up and then they go down. Right, we're still in the Jacob's dream piece. Yordim ve'olim ein ketiv kan. One would normally think that angels come down from heaven on a ladder. Once they've done their job, they then go back up to heaven on the same ladder. Well, this is not how we are being told the future will play out. But they rise up. Okay, Ela olim, they rise up to power v'yordim. The Jacob's ladder picture of the angels going up and then going down has to be a reference not to actual angels coming down to earth, but to angels gaining power, gaining sovereignty and control. Olim heim v'aliyat helan, they do go up, they do rise up. El shekol echad yarud mechavero. Each one of them not only goes down, but is at a lower level. They rise and then they fall. But with Yarad, we also have the term of Yarud, is at a lower level. This is now going to take a different picture from how we view the various exiles that we have endured over the centuries. Which was the worst? Which is the best? Which is the most powerful? The vision that the king has in Daniel chapter 2 starts off V'hu tzalma reshe didahav. The head of the statue was made of gold. Then the body is made of silver. Bronze is the material for the arms, and the legs and feet are made of iron and pottery. So there is a reduction in the status, in the power of the kingdoms that prevail over the world. Daniel interprets the dream that Bavel is Lama'ala Mikulam. Babylon, the kingdom where he is, the king that he is interpreting the dream for, this is the head of gold. Antu Resha Didava. He says right there in chapter 2, verse 38, you are the head of gold. And after you will rise a king, Malchu Achare Ara Minach, worse than you, lower than you. And a third one, which is going to be even lower, and in the end, it's going to be a kingdom which has feet of clay. Some parts of the foot, some parts of the feet are going to be made of metal, of barzel, of iron, and other parts are going to be made of pottery. And some will be strong and some will be broken. This is the biggie. This is the real biggie that's going to lead us into a lot of complexities. The vision is going to come up again in Daniel's visions at the end of the book, where we are looking at a horn and then another horn and a horn within a horn. This is a different picture. Our fourth exile is represented by the feet of the statue in Daniel chapter 2. And I promise we will get to the actual text of the story and read the description as in a great deal more detail than we have at this point. But we would have thought that since this particular exile that we're living in is the longest, the most difficult, and the one that's completely impossible to understand and comprehend, that this will be the strongest. But from the picture that we're getting here, very briefly from Bereshit Rabbah 68, this exile is in fact the weakest. This is the least important, the least significant. Its leadership is the least spiritually powered, physically powered. This is something we have to discuss, obviously, in terms of the more precise details of the text itself. But we've turned around quite a bit. Our current exile is the weakest, the most fragmented, the one that is most easily broken. Okay, so here we have four different things right in the very beginning of the Torah, in the book of Bereshit, that tell us details, admittedly details encoded, but details that become very, very clear when we fully understand the book of Daniel. The beginning and the end, as we saw at the very beginning in Rabbeinu Bachya, the beginning and the end are intimately connected. The end is spelled out in the beginning, and the beginning looks forward to the end. So we're coming to answer questions like, why did God create the world? What's the purpose of all of human existence? Why is there so much trouble and tribulation in the world today, and so many terrible things happened in the past? We're going to move on to the Maharalmi Prague, Rabbi Huda ben Betzalel. He died in 1609, and very, very well known. There's a sefer called Ner Mitzvah, and this is text number 12. And we're going to read some of this because there is, surprisingly, the similarity of the kingdoms of the world and Israel to the red heifer. The micro, the macro. One of the things we've learned very often when we're studying Chassidut is that anything that you're looking at in the Bible, any Torah lesson that you're learning, is at one and the same time about you, about me, the individual human being, the individual Jew. And it's also about the community as a whole that we live in, the nation of Israel. but it is also about the entire world. And these are the most powerful lessons that Hasidic masters bring out here. It's the Maharal. The great Hasidic masters all love the Maharal. And here he's going to bring the connection to the Para Aduma, Parshat Chukat. I'm sure you're all very familiar with the whole issue of the Para Aduma, the red heifer. And the red heifer is one of the more puzzling and unusual institutions and halachot of the Bible. Someone who has become ritually impure by contact with a dead person, a dead creepy crawly, etc., has to have sprinkled on him or on her the ashes of a burned red heifer. And nobody knows the reason for it. It is one of the most ambiguous and hidden meanings of things that we have. And Maharal is going to tell us, first line, the four nations, Arba Malchut, refers to and connects with the Para Aduma. Not one that you would normally think of as an association, but the red heifer does indeed help us understand the four nations and the difficulties and the trials, tribulations, and how history is playing out. Second line in text number 12, Perusha Inyan. What am I talking about, says the Maharal? The Para Aduma, mitzvahi mi madrega elyona. This mitzvah comes from the highest level, in the levels of heaven. Ad she'ein adam yachol lahasig et ha-mitzvah hazot. No human being can fully comprehend this particular mitzvah. And we know that Shlomo HaMelech, the wisest of all men, said, this is beyond me. There is a reason for it. God has a reason for it. And God has a reason for telling us to do this Para Aduma thing, ceremony, ritual. But that reasoning is only accessible at the highest levels of existence, at the highest levels of wisdom, within what we might want to describe as God's level of understanding. So line number 4, Masha Amdu Arba Malchuyot, the fact that there have been 4 nations, 4 kingdoms in the world, V'chein Silukan Milaolam, and their departure from the world, why and how these 4 nations come and go, that comes from a very, very high level indeed. The same level as the Para Aduma. It is something that cannot be understood with human logic. We have to accept it as an axiom, as a note that fell from heaven for us, and we have to just do the Para Aduma without fully understanding it. Accept the whole notion of the 4 kingdoms without fully comprehending how and precisely why. When you understand these things, once you understand that there is stuff that you're not going to understand, lo yelecha tmeah, you will not have any question al arichat hagalut, on the length of the exile. Right? And, the Maharal was writing in the 16th century and feeling the exile a good deal more bitterly and suffering more difficulties in his times than we are today. Nonetheless, you cannot ask the question. You just have to accept that this comes from the highest level. And especially this exile that we're in now. Al titamesh kach or ko la hayamim. Why has it lasted so long? Because it does. Because God in his infinite wisdom said, this is how it's supposed to last. And according to the strength that each of these nations have, the Para Aduma tells us that this mitzvah has a meaning for it, an understanding to it, Elyona b'ma'od ma'od, high in the highest possible level. Can't figure it out, but it's from God, and it's for a good purpose, and it's for the purpose of everything going in the right way and everyone living happily ever after on the spiritual plane. V'chein Yaakov Avinu, kasher ra'a b'chalom, back to Bereshit 28 that we looked at a few minutes ago. Hinei sulam mutzav arza, the ladder in the ground. He saw, according to the Midrash in Vayikra Rabbah, this is a little bit more of a layer onto the picture, that the angels going up and then going down are the four nations. Really important line here from Vayikra Rabbah. Ra'a malchut reviyit ola v'lo ra'a ota yoredet. What Yaakov saw was that the fourth kingdom rose up, went up the ladder, its angel went up the ladder, meaning it gained power and dominance. V'lo ra'a ota yoredet, and he did not see that fourth angel coming down. The fourth kingdom still rules. What exactly that fourth kingdom is, we're going to spend quite a bit of time looking through the commentaries on the book of Daniel, figuring out what it actually is. Just as it is not possible to understand the sod, the deepest real meaning behind the para aduma, we cannot, with our human understanding, be able to figure out when the end of the fourth nation, the fourth kingdom, is going to come. So don't be so worried. Al yitmah ha'adam. A person should not be worried about the length of this exile. It's going to come to an end. It does have an end, and that will happen. Text number 13. Again, the Maharal is talking about the four kingdoms and the red heifer, right? Next to last source, number 13. Bitul Eila Arba Malchuyot, the end, the nullification of these kingdoms. V'chazarat Malchut Yisrael, and its return, the return of the kingdom of Israel. Nirmaz davka b'mitzvat para aduma. It is alluded to in the mitzvah of the para aduma, of the red heifer, because the end of all of these kingdoms is a very, very high level of understanding that the annulment of these kingdoms and their power, because they ruled over the world, and they're receiving rulership and power, and hefsedam, and their end, their losses and their falling, comes from makom elyon ma'od. If you want to put it in like very straightforward English, all this comes from within the mind of God himself. And God is keeping that piece of information a closely guarded secret. So the return of the nation of Israel to its place comes from the very highest place. And not as it appears in this world, that the success of the four kingdoms is not from God himself, appears to be the fall or the rise of their particular military power. It is from the para aduma level of understanding. It is from Adriga Elyona Ma'od, Mipnei Omka Lo Noda'a. It is just so deep. It is just so secret, so impossible to understand. The mitzvah of the para aduma is not known. It is not understandable. And the return of the kingdom of Israel to its place, and the complete destruction of the four nations, lo noda, it's not made known, lo nigle hazman la-nevi'im. The time was not revealed to the prophets. Technically speaking, Daniel is not considered a Navi, but he is there in the Hebrew Bible. And he does attempt to tell us a time frame, But he's told by the angel, by the spiritual being that he is meeting up there in heaven, I'm sorry, I can give you this amount of information, but no more. The Para Aduma and the whole issue of when the dominion of the four nations comes to an end, when Israel returns to full sovereignty, when there will be true peace reigning in the world, that's a big, big secret. You will see many people on the internet today, many rabbis, saying all sorts of unbelievable statements that the Messiah is due to come in a certain time. Throughout history, we've always tried to do this. You hear predictions made in the name of the Chafetz Chaim, predictions in the name of the Rambam, Maimonides. He has in the Igeret Teiman, the letter he sent to the Jews of Yemen, he has a date for the Messiah's arrival. Even though he says categorically we should not attempt to predict the Messiah's arrival, he has that. He has a date. He also quotes Rav Sadia Gaon, who gave a date at an earlier time. And Rambam says, yeah, he needed to do that because of the particular times. We try very hard. We try very, very hard to know when it's all going to be over. You're lying in a hospital bed, chas v'shalom, and the doctor says you need to be here for 3 days, or maybe a week, or maybe you'll be here for a month. That's not something we can easily live with. But if the doctor says you're going to go home on Tuesday morning, that's an enormous relief. This is what we're trying to figure out. When are all these tribulations going to end? When are the nations of the world no longer going to have power over the nation of Israel? When is there going to be real peace? And that is the focus of the book of Daniel. It's going to take us from Bereshit, from the beginning of creation, show us some major aspects, the broad brushstrokes of God's plan for history as it unfolds. We're going to be looking through a number of different commentaries, Rashi, Radak. Well, there's no Radak on Daniel, I'm sorry. We're going to be looking through Rav Sadia Gaon and a few other of the commentaries, Abarbanel. And you'll see that all of them, like one of the earlier Midrashim we looked at from Bereshit Rabbah, all of them are going to frame things in terms and times and situations that they understood, which I think gives us the right to look around and say, yeah, I think this is what this horn refers to. This is what that horn refers to in the later visions. Here we've got a particular nation in the world that is the feet of clay. And here we've got another particular nation or region of the world that is the feet of iron. All of them are your own choice. We know the way things are going. There's a beginning, there is an end, there's a process that it all has to go through. How we understand and how we try to understand the world around us based on the text of the book of Daniel is what we're going to be spending time on in the next few weeks. There are 12 chapters in the book of Daniel. I'd like to aim for one a week, one for each lesson. And hopefully what we will do is focus on the big pictures and the big issues rather than all of the details. It's very, very easy to get bogged down in the technicalities, and certainly with chapter 1 that's there. What I want to conclude with today is note number 14, the text 14. It's on the Ner Mitzvah of the Maharal Prague again. And like the great Hasidic masters, he's telling you this is also about you. Realize that the four kingdoms, the vision that Nebuchadnezzar saw and that Daniel shows us and explains, he saw 4 kingdoms. Nebuchadnezzar saw 4. The translation here is a little bit peculiar. I didn't pay too much attention to it. I apologize for that. But the Hebrew is quite simple. Ra'aoto b'toar u'v'tzelem Adam. Nebuchadnezzar the king sees the future in the image of a man, right? Its head was made of gold, its body, its chest was made of silver, etc., etc., right? Let's take a look at the English because it does somewhat translate it a little bit. The representation of a man. It is appropriate. All four of these empires should appear as one man. For a man, a human being, has four parts. The first, the intellectual capacity. Below that, the emotional capacity. Lower than that, the physical. There are three parts to the body, and then there is one more that connects all of them. Soul. The godly soul within all of us. And this is something that Maharal is referring us to in his commentary on Pirkei Avot, and that is something that we should keep in the back of our minds as we look at this system of four kingdoms, four nations, four metals, four beasts, and then we'll get into the horn imagery and the ram with the multiple horns. The four things are not just about the world out there around us and are beginning to understand and make sense and put in context events, history, and how history is unfolding towards its real, good, happy ending, but it's also a means of understanding ourselves. There are different parts of us that are represented by the four parts of that statue, the four metals, and that is something that I hope we'll touch upon a little bit, and I hope I will not get us too bogged down in too many details, because we are here to take a relatively straightforward reading of the book of Daniel and to look at the pictures, the visions, have all of these things clearly in our minds, and then take all of this information and go back to our study of any part of the Bible, any part of Torah, armed with the key to the door. Thank you for your time. We are going to do this again same time next week on Tuesday. Ahead, we will be reading the Bible, chapter 1, starting with the verse 1, and that basically sets the picture for where Daniel is, what is his education. He is trained as a scholar and as a wizard. He goes to the biblical equivalent of Hogwarts and learns wizardry and magic, and then that sets up the whole scene for advising the king and having access to the king's dreams, and a lot of good stuff coming up. So please join us again this time next Tuesday. We will be getting at 11:30 in the a.m. Have a wonderful day. Have a great Yom HaAtzmaut. And let's now go and do things to remember all of those who have fallen in defense of our holy land. Thank you.